71,000 containers stuck at ports. $28.4 billion in Boeing's market capitalization evaporated in just 48 hours. And this is just the beginning of the global shock called the US-China trade war. Ports are gridlocked. Retail is paralyzed. In early April 2025, the US announced a 145% tariff on over $300 billion worth of imports from China. In just 3 days, exports from China to the US dropped by 47%. In Shanghai, Ningbo, and Shenzhen, containers piled up. More than 71,000 containers were stuck. In California, 27 cargo ships waited offshore, with unloading times stretching to 96 hours, matching the record set during COVID. Container shipping costs surged from $1,950 to $6,820, a 250% increase in just 1 year. 10 days. Shipping companies began canceling contracts mid-route, citing unpredictable pricing due to sudden policy changes. Amazon, the e-commerce giant, canceled shipments on their way. Five Below, the discount retail chain, canceled $67 million worth of orders, equivalent to 11% of their Q2 inventory. China's retaliation. Precise and quiet. On April 3, 2025, China quietly issued an order to halt all Boeing aircraft deliveries. No announcements, no arguments. In just 48 hours, Boeing lost $28.4 billion in market capitalization. 787 and 787 Dreamliner deliveries expected in Q2 and Q3 were all postponed. According to Bloomberg, this was a precise strike at America's #1 export symbol. Meanwhile, Airbus benefited. Shares rose 11.2% in Frankfurt as China redirected orders. This is no longer just trade. It's an attack on a symbol. And Boeing, as the industrial leader, is the most visible target. U.S. auto industry in crisis. From chip shortages to soaring prices. The consequences spread from consumer goods to the U.S. auto industry. Ford had to halt production of the F-150 Lightning, GM cut battery production by 60%, and Stellantis reduced production due to parts shortages. In the second week of April, 41,000 vehicles remained unfinished, resulting in over $1.6 billion in losses. Car prices surged significantly. Stellantis raised hybrid prices by 8%, and Ford increased the Mustang Mach-E price by $1,200. Even used cars saw a 4.1% price increase in just 1 week. The average price of a new car in the U.S. reached $47,770, an increase of $2,600 in April, relocating factories, scarce land, and risks in the shadows. In response, companies began relocating. Tesla moved Model 3 production to Berlin, Toyota reduced chip dependency by 30%, and Stellantis shifted production lines to Mexico. However, these solutions faced barriers. Hong and Cat Lai ports reached 94% capacity. India relies 60% on road transport, and Mexico increased waiting times at the Laredo border crossing to 12.5 hours. Moreover, China tightened exports of rare earths, causing Ford, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon to experience critical supply shortages. The earliest forecast for alternative sources is late 2026. Meanwhile, China quietly sold U.S. government bonds, reducing its holdings to the lowest level since 2011. From a tariff decision to a global overhaul, 145% in tariffs, 55 aircraft undeliverable, 10% of cargo volume vanished from Asia's largest ports, and within just 1 week, the global supply chain began to unravel. Tariff shock. In April 2025, Washington announced a staggering 145% tariff on a wide range of Chinese imports. The list includes smartphones, chips, auto parts, medical devices, and even LED lights used in factories. Almost instantly, major ports like Shanghai, Guangdong, and Tianjin came to a standstill. Within 5 days, 10% of shipping volume disappeared. Thousands of containers were held up, abandoned, or turned around. With a 145% tariff, many products became unprofitable overnight. Amazon canceled nearly 300 shipping contracts. Walmart announced a 90-day freeze on incoming goods. Five Below suspended all business with China. All it takes is one container hit with tariffs, and entire profit margins can vanish within 48 hours. Auto industry turbulence and logistics storm wires, sensors, control modules, AC units, core components in modern car manufacturing are largely sourced from China. A single car might require over 30,000 individual parts, thousands of which are imported. For factories in Detroit, Tennessee, or Mexico, the absence of just one sensor could halt an entire assembly line. No modules, no cars off the line, no safety sensors, no units sold. One missing part could shut down a plant for 3 to 5 days, costing millions in lost output. Shipping costs from Asia to the US, already inflated post-pandemic, rose another 20 to 30% due to severe container backlogs. Aviation hit head-on. In direct retaliation, China suspended all deliveries of Boeing aircraft, including orders already placed and awaiting shipment. In total, 55 aircraft valued at approximately $12 billion were frozen. Boeing shares dropped 3% overnight. As the largest exporter in the US, Boeing supports over 1.6 million indirect jobs and forms a critical pillar of American heavy industry. China previously accounted for 26 to 28% of Boeing's global orders, primarily the 737 and 787 models. Losing this market meant more than lost revenue. It sent shockwaves through Boeing's supply chain, impacting partners like GE Aviation and Spirit AeroSystems. A difficult pivot for manufacturers. To minimize trade war risks, many corporations began to shift direction. Amazon, Walmart, and leading automakers announced plans to move supply chains out of China. They turned to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, nations with lower labor costs and abundant workers. Others, like Tesla and General Motors, sought partners in Mexico or India, closer and better aligned with the US market. But shifting a supply chain doesn't happen overnight. A single auto part change requires rigorous testing, safety verification, and integration, often taking 6 months to 2 years. In addition, logistics infrastructure, tax regulations, and labor laws in substitute countries are not yet equipped to absorb the massive production scale. Ripple effects. Higher prices, longer waits, fewer choices. This trade shock is no longer a temporary disruption. It's reshaping the very structure of global manufacturing. The key question: does the low-cost, globalized production model still work in an age of uncertainty, or will companies be forced to pay more for the sake of stability? For consumers, this shift brings real consequences. EV and gasoline car prices may rise 15 to 20% within the next 12 months. Delivery times could double compared to current standards. Model variety is shrinking due to part shortages. $10 billion shifted to Europe. 14 million tons of gas rerouted away from the US. And 10,000 American jobs vanished in just a few months. What is happening to the global gas industry? Global players changed the game. Canada used to be a reliable source of gas for the United States. So was Qatar. But now, both countries are quietly redrawing the global energy map. Exporting to the US is no longer the priority. Instead, they're sealing multi-billion-dollar deals with Europe and Asia. Qatar, which produces over 77 million tons of gas annually, just signed long-term contracts with Germany, Italy, and other partners. The deal with Germany alone is worth over $10 billion. And Canada? A mega project in British Columbia now allows the country to export over 14 million tons of gas each year to international markets. Ships that once headed to the US now set course for Japan and Europe. Tariffs ignite the spark. It all started with a number: 25%. That's the tariff the US placed on imported gas, including from Canada and Qatar. The intention was to support domestic production. But the consequences were anything but expected. Instead of attracting more supply, America's traditional partners pulled away. Canada saw profits drop sharply when exporting to the US. Meanwhile, Europe, desperate for gas after losing key suppliers, was willing to pay more.
We will also be willing to pay higher prices than other international hubs. And
Qatar moved fast with flexible pricing models. Canada reoriented its ports toward global trade. And just like that, gas flows shifted in a new direction. How the US is paying the price. Gas prices in the United States have surged to nearly $5 per gallon. This isn't just a temporary fluctuation. It's the direct result of losing over 10 million tons of gas that used to flow reliably from Canada and Qatar. And the damage isn't just numerical. Over 10,000 jobs in America's gas industry have disappeared. Workers who once operated pipelines, processing facilities, and LNG terminals are now out of work. Gas processing plants in Texas and Louisiana are barely hanging on. They don't have enough supply to run at full capacity, and they don't have enough contracts to keep their labor force intact. With supply shrinking, operational costs have spiked. And that's triggering a chain reaction. Electricity prices are rising, raw material costs are climbing, and eventually, food and consumer goods are becoming more expensive too. Who will lead in the next decade? Looking at the numbers, the leaders are clear. Qatar plans to increase production by 10% over the next 5 years. Canada is building new ports, expanding pipelines, and targeting buyers in Japan and South Korea. Europe has already locked in decades-long contracts with both countries, ensuring stable supply and lower costs compared to American options. And the US faces two choices: either cut domestic production costs through advanced extraction technologies, or find new export markets to avoid falling behind. This is no longer just a competition over profits. It is a strategic race, because whoever controls the supply controls the pace of industrial growth, consumer prices, and the job market. Right now, both Qatar and Canada hold the advantage. They have high output, competitive pricing, long-term contracts, and most importantly, they are not constrained by the volatile tariff policies like those in the United States. In just 3 months, Tesla lost over $760 billion in market value. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, Elon Musk's personal wealth dropped by $135 billion. But this collapse wasn't just triggered by the market. It was the world turning its back. The first collapse, from stocks to trust. In just 1 month, Tesla's market cap plummeted by $135 billion. On Wall Street, panic spread like wildfire. In real life, Tesla showrooms turned into protest sites with signs condemning Elon Musk. Starlink, once seen as a symbol of global connection, began losing contracts one by one. From strategic markets to developing nations, the damage came fast. But what shocked the world even more were the reactions from abroad. Allies strike. Canada drops the first hammer. In April 2025, Canada delivered a bombshell announcement. Tesla vehicles would no longer qualify for federal EV incentives. And more than that, 43 million Canadian dollars in pending rebates were frozen on the spot. Within 72 hours, Tesla dealerships across Canada were overwhelmed with cancellations. Financing deals fell apart, an entire quarter of revenue erased. And just as Tesla was trying to stabilize, a second wave hit from across the Atlantic. Europe's response: taxes and isolation. The European Union rolled out new tariffs aimed directly at American EVs. Tesla was the primary target, but what hurt more than taxes was exclusion. Tesla was removed from all subsidy programs in Germany. Consumers now had to pay thousands more for a Tesla, while Volkswagen and Renault remained fully subsidized. It didn't just hurt sales, it erased Tesla's competitive edge before the customer even entered the showroom. Volkswagen moves in, fast and focused. While Tesla scrambled, Volkswagen attacked. With fully local production, they slashed EV prices across Europe. Middle-class buyers, once dreaming of a Model 3 or Model Y, now found Volkswagen hatchbacks and SUVs more accessible and proudly local. The difference? Tesla imported and paid tariffs. Volkswagen built at home, with support from both governments and the public. BYD surges, a new force from Asia. Globally, BYD, the Chinese EV giant, quietly overtook Tesla. No noise, no declarations, just execution. With a vertically integrated supply chain, BYD controlled its own batteries, chips, and raw materials. While Tesla relied on foreign partners, BYD was self-reliant. Across Asia, Latin America, and Africa, BYD won government fleet deals, electric bus contracts, and even tax breaks to build local factories. And in Q1 2025, BYD officially outsold Tesla in global EV units. Internal crisis, strikes, and distrust. Over 20,000 workers at Tesla's Fremont, Austin, and Sparks factories walked out. Not just over pay, but forced overtime, worsening conditions, and total silence from leadership amid a collapsing stock price. Tesla reacted harshly. Layoffs, legal threats, security escorts. But that only made things worse. Output dropped by 35%. Assembly lines stalled, delivery dates pushed back by months. And in internal meetings, senior engineers voiced doubt that Tesla could hit next year's production goals. It was no longer just a company crisis. It was an operational breakdown. Systemic ripple effects. When the symbol breaks. Tesla wasn't just a company, it was a symbol. Millions of Americans invested in it, directly or through pensions, mutual funds, and savings plans. When Tesla's value crashed, the impact spread. Major investment funds posted losses. Banks tightened credit. Real estate markets in Tesla-reliant cities like Austin and Fremont began to dip. But perhaps most devastating of all, Tesla lost its identity. No longer the symbol of the future, no longer the company the world looked up to.
American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
Roughly 5% of global trade moves through a single channel, worth over $500 billion annually. It has long been a quiet powerhouse of the global economy. But with new infrastructure developments emerging in Central America, global attention is once again turning toward who controls the world's most strategic waterways. Canals, the lifelines of global trade. Modern commerce runs on efficient logistics, and no routes are more critical than the narrow canals that link entire oceans. The Panama Canal, though just 82 kilometers long, has reduced the transit time between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans from over 100 days to approximately 25. The Suez Canal, meanwhile, connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, shaving thousands of miles off trade routes between Europe and Asia. Each voyage through Suez can save shipping companies up to $1 million in fuel, crew wages, and time. Collectively, these canals handle more than 12% of the world's annual trade volume, making them not just vital commercial routes, but geopolitical assets of the highest order. Control over canals means control over flows of capital. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Egypt temporarily restricted access to the Suez Canal. Over 15,000 ships were forced to divert, sending costs soaring and trade routes into disarray. Before the Panama Canal existed, cargo ships traveling from New York to San Francisco were required to navigate around Cape Horn, 13,000 nautical miles through some of the world's most unpredictable and hazardous waters. Canals reduce this burden. They save time, capital, and lives. And in times of conflict, whoever holds authority over them may possess a significant advantage, not through force, but through logistics. China's re-emerging interest in a second American canal. In 2014, a Chinese businessman named Wang Jing announced a bold $50 billion project to construct a new canal through Nicaragua, roughly 800 kilometers northwest of Panama. While the announcement drew international headlines, the initiative eventually stalled due to funding uncertainties and local resistance. Environmental concerns and displacement issues led to widespread protests. Eventually, the project was shelved. Yet in 2024, renewed developments suggest a strategic pivot. This time, the focus isn't on a single private investor. Instead, infrastructure upgrades, ranging from seaports to rail lines, are being implemented across the proposed route. Although officially described as commercial investments, analysts note that these projects align with earlier canal proposals, raising questions about long-term objectives. U.S. response: a strategic stand. Recent comments from former U.S. President Donald Trump highlighted growing concerns. He remarked, "China did not build this canal, does not operate this canal, and will not weaponize this canal." Such statements underscore Washington's broader strategic view. Today, over 72% of cargo transiting the Panama Canal is either destined for or originates in the United States. The emergence of an alternative, potentially controlled by another global power, could introduce logistical inefficiencies and shift regional influence. To mitigate these concerns, the U.S. may consider diplomatic and financial tools, such as discouraging investment through global lending institutions or enforcing financial compliance measures similar to those used in other high-profile trade cases. More than shipping, a question of influence. To deter the proposed Nicaragua Canal project, the United States may consider familiar measures, such as applying financial pressure on global investors, limiting capital access from major institutions, and enforcing supply chain restrictions. Meanwhile, Nicaragua's shift in diplomatic alignment toward China has altered the regional balance. What began as a commercial proposal now carries broader strategic implications. If completed, the canal could generate over $5 billion annually and significantly increase China's presence in the Western Hemisphere. The question now is not whether China intends to build the canal, but whether the United States is prepared to respond, and how soon. Elon Musk spent over $10 million in Wisconsin, but his candidate lost by 10%. Trump revoked access to classified information and removed Musk's appointee just 48 hours later. The Trump administration spent about $18 billion per day, while the U.S. GDP was projected to grow by only 1.8%. Elon Musk's political failure. Elon Musk's political failure goes beyond the unsuccessful campaign in Wisconsin. It marks a series of events that have diminished his credibility and power. Despite investing millions of dollars into the campaign and wholeheartedly supporting his candidate, the result was a disappointing loss by a margin of 10%. This was a major shock, as Musk, known for his influence on political and economic decisions, had to witness his candidate's defeat. However, this loss wasn't the only factor that stripped Musk of his power. Trump made the decision to cut off Musk's access to classified information, a move that not only limited Musk's ability to influence strategic decisions, but also caused him to lose an important part of his political career. Particularly when Musk nominated someone for a senior position in the government, Trump immediately removed them just 48 hours later. This was a major blow to Musk's image, as his influence in politics continued to diminish. Moreover, Musk's reputation was further damaged when he was publicly criticized as a burden and the most annoying person on the planet. These critiques didn't just come from political opponents, but also from those who once supported him. This shows that despite his financial power and significant influence in the tech industry, Musk couldn't maintain long-term political influence when unable to manage conflicts and failures in his strategies, internal conflicts, loss of power. Musk's struggles weren't limited to political failure. He also faced significant internal conflicts within the administration. He openly criticized Peter Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, over disagreements about tariffs, calling him dumb as a brick. This tension led Musk to lose crucial support from policy allies, reducing his influence in key decision-making processes. Moreover, the threatening emails Musk had previously sent to civil servants, which once instilled fear, no longer had the same effect. This demonstrates that his political power has drastically diminished, and he no longer has the ability to influence government decisions as he once did. This marks a significant decline in Musk's role and influence. U.S. economy in severe recession. The U.S. economy under Trump is plunging into a deep crisis. The government is spending up to $18 billion per day, much higher than the $14 billion per day under Biden's administration. These figures are deeply concerning, especially as U.S. GDP growth is projected to reach only 1.8% in 2025, a significant drop from the 2.8% forecasted for 2024, according to IMF projections. The stock market is also struggling, with the Dow Jones falling more than 2,000 points in April, marking the worst drop since the Great Depression. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 index also plummeted 14% in the first quarter, the worst drop since 1928. The U.S. economy is facing a severe recession, And despite Musk's prominent influence, he too cannot escape the impacts of this crisis. Elon Musk is gradually losing the political influence he has built over the years. At the same time, the Trump administration is sinking deeper into an economic and internal crisis that seems unlikely to be overcome easily. This is not just a setback for Musk, but a clear indication of deep fractures within the current political and economic system of the US. This situation is likely to have significant consequences in the near future. Donald Trump, the self-proclaimed figure who promised to make America great again, is now sinking in a storm of scandals, where the truth is peeling back the fake facade. The dazzling shine only covers the cracks that are falling apart.
This administration is profoundly evil in ways that are difficult for Americans to comprehend. We have reached a stage of illegality, immorality, and depravity in a federal administration that
You can't do anything about
Master negotiator,
can't do
art of the
anything
deal.
about the tin pot dictator. He's paying millions of dollars to hide these people in a concentration.
The marriage between Donald Trump and Melania has always been the center of attention. The media built them into the perfect couple, a symbol of the ideal American family. But George Conway shattered this illusion, pointing out that their relationship was not the romantic love story the public had imagined. In reality, this marriage is nothing more than a media strategy, where everything is just a performance to maintain a flawless image in front of the public.
The problem is, this is the United States government, and nobody, we've never seen this level of ridiculous for the federal courts by a federal administration. I mean, even President Truman obeyed the order in the steel seizure case that said he couldn't, in an actual time of war, he seized a steel mill in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio.
Trump, a billionaire and reality TV star, entered the White House with a blank political resume, and that led to many failures in running the country. The most notable failure was in the trade war with China. The tariffs policy, expected to boost the economy, instead led to serious consequences. Soaring prices, industries severely affected, and American citizens bearing the brunt. In just the first year of the trade war, the economy lost billions of dollars, and many American workers lost their jobs. Those working-class people, promised protection, ended up being the hardest hit. Can an administration function well without preparation and experience?
What they're doing is, and the magic word of the day is contumacious, which is the legal adjective that describes contemptuous behavior against the court.
Oh, is that what that word is?
Contumation.
Not only did Trump fail to bolster the economy, but he also damaged America's long-standing diplomatic relationships. His close ties with dictatorial leaders like Putin and Kim Jong-un made the U.S. more isolated on the global stage. Longtime allies such as Europe and Canada started viewing America with skepticism, causing the U.S. to lose its global leadership role. The world not only criticized Trump for his foreign policy decisions, but also for ignoring important diplomatic relationships with democratic countries. America is no longer the global leader it once proudly was. When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, Trump failed to lead the country effectively. Instead of organizing and guiding the response, he denied medical advice and made false statements, making the situation worse. Studies show that the lack of preparedness and the delayed response from his administration led to millions of Americans getting sick and dying, while the economy continued to decline. People are left wondering, can a leader save a country when they refuse to listen to experts and lead the nation properly?
Need to hear that conversation between Trump and Bukele that didn't make it to the U.S. feed. We didn't need to know that that's what it's sustained.
Yeah.
They don't need to know that the liberty of anybody, the due process rights of anybody, any person in the United States under the Fifth Amendment, if any person, regardless of whether they're aliens, regardless of whether they have a green card or they're here illegally, they're all entitled to due process, as are we.
Trump deepened the division in the country more than ever before. His words and actions created an environment where racism, disrespect for the truth, and moral decay became part of politics. Trump's statements about minority groups and those opposing him only served to deepen the divide in society. A country needs unity to prosper, but under Trump's leadership, America has fallen into disarray and conflict that seems irreparable. Can a nation move forward when its unity is shattered and trust in the government is gone?